What if the product you use daily, like your water bottle, laundry detergent, even your kid's favorite snack, were doing more harm than you realize? In today's episode, we're going to dive into some surprising truth about hidden toxins in our homes and what you can do about it without getting overwhelmed. Next on the podcast, let's do this.
Welcome to the No Sitting on the Sideline Dad podcast, a podcast about a journey of discovery and conversations about not sitting on the sideline of life. Let's get involved. Here's host Joe Foley.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. I'm really glad you're here today. Before we dive in, just a quick heads up with this interview with Tanya Harris. It was recorded a few years ago, but the message is still spot on. Tanya is an environmental toxin expert, childhood cancer survivor, and in this conversation, she shares a down-to-earth way to reduce everyday toxins in your home without, getting overwhelmed. Also, one more thing. This episode is for informational purposes only. This isn't meant to be medical advice. Always check with your healthcare provider before making any health-related changes. Also, do your research. It's really important to do your research. More information you have, more decisions can be made. And also, better off you are. So, let's get into the interview with Tanya Harris. Welcome to the podcast, Tanya.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you much for reaching out. I really do appreciate it and taking your time out of your day. And it's a nice Thursday here. I'm not sure what it's like in Chicago. Up in New Hampshire. We're going to get a little bit of rain from Elsa. It's kind of fun here on a hurricane named after a Disney movie. It's just funny. We're getting the rain tonight and tomorrow, but it's fun. It's okay. It's part of living up in this part of the country and stuff like that. But one thing, environmental, we'll talk about a hurricane, but environmental toxin expert, what is that?
Basically, I help parents, families, and busy people in general just remove some of the toxins from their home that could be affecting their family's health. I started because I'm a childhood cancer survivor and we had issues with our kids growing up. And I think it was really when my son started having ADHD symptoms in school and the school wanted to test him, but I don't know what it was in me. Maybe it was my childhood cancer survivor, but something in me said, maybe it's something in our home because I was always brought up to say, be careful what you eat, be careful what you do. So I went home and I did a bunch of research, went back to school a few weeks later after taking out artificial colors and benzoate preservatives, and the school didn't want to test him anymore. Environmental toxin expert to me is just, I have spent years studying these toxins. I got a master's degree and then went in holistic nutrition, then went on to become board certified so I can understand how they work in the body and how to teach people to lessen their exposure to them.
What's interesting too, what are some of the common toxins we deal with every day? People don't realize it, but they're in digesting them or inhaling them. What kind of toxins that we deal with every day?
That's a great question. There's everything in your plastic food storage containers, like phthalates. Those are used to soften plastics, but they're linked to lower IQ in children. They can also disrupt your hormones and act as hormone disruptors, also known as endocrine disruptors. And they go in and they can block or mimic or over or underproduce hormones. So when that happens, you can see where so many different things can happen to your body. BPA is another one. Again, in plastic reusable water bottles, food storage containers. So I really recommend taking plastic out of your kitchen. BPA is linked to behavior issues in children. And there were some studies that said it was linked to things like cardiovascular effects. You can inhale these toxins, you can touch these toxins. It's not just what you eat, it's what you put on your body and around your body.
Well, it's interesting too, talk about water bottles too. And I just recently bought an insulated water bottle. It's metal inside. And what's the difference between using one of those and a BPA water bottle?
Well, a BPA water bottle can actually leach those chemicals into the water. So if you use a reusable one and you heat it up, that's why I always recommend never putting it in the dishwasher. Don't leave a plastic water bottle in a car. It can heat up. And then those chemicals can get right into whatever you're drinking. So one of the questions I get too is, can I put it in the refrigerator after I get home, after it's been heated, or in my car? And the answer is no, the chemicals have already leached. I recommend using a stainless steel like you had just mentioned, or glass. But the other thing I want to point out too with BPA is you can buy BPA-free plastic water bottles. But what they do is BPA is bisphenol A. What they usually do is replace that with a bisphenol S or a bisphenol F, which have the same type of health effects as BPA. So they're really not any safer.
Well, it's interesting, plastic. And everybody, when I go to work and I have my lunch, I always have a plastic container in Tupperware. And people always say, do not heat your food in that. I'm like, oh, I breathe outside, you breathe exhaust from cars or perfume some, but I'm like, little plastic is not going to hurt me, but could it?
It's a great point with heating for sure. I always tell people too, because it's very overwhelming to look at your food storage containers. I can remember starting out and I was like, I have so many. And how do I replace all these? So again, my brand is slightly greener. I don't want people to feel like they're so pressured and have to replace everything all at once. So what I recommend is people going in and just choosing their top one or two most used size food containers or reusable water bottles and just replace those first. Because yes, when we do heat them or put them through the dishwasher or leave them in a hot car, that's when those plastic chemicals can leach into foods or beverages. But if you do have food storage containers that are plastic, you can put dry foods in them, like pretzels or trail mix, and nothing will happen.
It's interesting too. Also, you mentioned something about like ADHD and stuff like that. How does the toxins relate to that?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a big question. The way these chemicals can act, some are toxic to the brain and nervous system. Some of the things we eat too, but things like BPA linked to behavior issues in children, BHA and BHT, they're found in some cereal coatings and a lot of other things. And with my son, it was artificial colors and benzoate preservatives that played a big role. They've even done studies and found that when you have artificial colors and a sodium benzoate in a beverage, that kids who haven't even been diagnosed with ADHD can actually show ADHD and behavior symptoms, even if you don't have that diagnosis. So, but a lot of these toxins can do some harm before birth. So it's important to be careful. For kids, they don't have the detoxification pathways necessary to detoxify these chemicals. So some of them are coming in and acting as endocrine disruptors. They can affect the brain and nervous system. So they can do it during development or even, in some of the foods we eat or blood sugar swings, things like that can cause ADHD-like symptoms, even if it's not completely ADHD.
Well, it's funny, interesting too. I mean, I have a 8-year-old son and stuff like that. And a lot of stuff that I see marketed to kids, there's so much chemicals in those things. One thing he loves is, I'll say, Sour Patch Kids and the sugar. And it's like, I call it kid rocket fuel. But I look at the ingredients in it and it's like, whoa, I can't pronounce some of the words.
Right. So that's one of the best rules to stick by for food is if you can pronounce it, it's probably good. But if you can't, then it's not.
Well, it's funny too. I mean, like Diet Coke, I'm a good example. And the ingredients as an adult, it's almost coming off like a drug sometimes with the chemicals in the base. I had a Diet Coke addiction for a long time and I cut it out. I don't have that anymore. But I remember coming down from that addiction. It was almost like having a hangover.
I know sugar can do that. And even some of those artificial sweeteners that are in there, some of our foods are built to actually cause a little bit of an addiction and to crave those foods and drinks.
Well, I know you've been holistic healing and you know about the slightly green method and stuff, but you also are a childhood leukemia survivor. Mm-hmm. I'm learning about that because leukemia is pretty tough, but it's a common thing, I guess.
I was diagnosed 2 weeks before my 7th birthday back in 1982. From 1st to 4th grade, I missed a lot of school and went through chemo. The interesting thing about that is I was actually treated by research and by a computer.
Oh, wow.
My parents had to make a choice between going with the current treatment, which didn't have a great survival rate, or treat me by computer, which back in 1982 was like not very heard of, with new research and what the computer decided. I was my doctor's first patient that didn't get radiation. I only underwent chemotherapy. And then I think by 8th grade, I was pretty much done and just going once a year. I went to that hospital until I was 21.
Well, that's great that you survived. It must give you some kind of perspective when you're also a parent too.
Oh, definitely. When I started this, I really wanted to concentrate on kids. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what caused my cancer. There's so many different things that can cause it in someone and not cause it in somebody else. There's just so many factors. When I look at toxins and what they can do to the body, I always think that it's kind of like a seatbelt. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we don't need it, but it's there for our protection. We don't know what we are preventing down the line by avoiding some of these toxins. So it's kind of the same thing, prevention.
Well, I was thinking about the popular weed killer, and it was, I always saw the advertising for, if you do this weed killer, you may have leukemia. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of stuff was in that and the chemical? And we're talking about toxin. I'm like, wow. So I think maybe leukemia may have been caused by some kind of toxin.
Yeah, there's definitely direct links, and pesticides also. There's a big link between that and childhood leukemia. Some of those things that we use every day are linked to certain types of cancers. Sure.
It's interesting. Toxins in the homes. I know we talked about water bottles and plastics, but what other kind of toxins are in the home?
Some can be flame retardant chemicals, which are also hormone disruptors, and those can be in furniture. They found household dust is one of the biggest exposures to toxins in the home, and that's where you can find things like flame retardant chemicals, phthalates, again, what was linked to lower IQ in children, and endocrine disruptors. It's such a big question because there's so many. In your foods, there's different things like MSG. That's one of my biggest ones to avoid. In your personal care products, parabens were found in biopsied breast cancer tumors.
MSG, though, that's interesting too, but I know it's preserved in food. Why is it such a big deal and to be avoided?
I personally like to avoid it for brain health. There's been studies. I don't know if it's a direct correlation with ADHD necessarily, but it does act on the brain in many ways. Another interesting thing it does is that it can shut off the hormone leptin, which tells you that you're full.
Okay.
So it's a flavor enhancer. It's actually the number one used in the world. So it's in many processed foods and snack foods. If you've ever had an entire bag of chips in front of the TV, that might be why. It can act on the brain and neurotransmitters in the prefrontal cortex. If we're familiar with ADHD, we know that that's where organization and things like that happen. So we definitely don't want to be consuming something that can actually affect those neurotransmitters.
Well, it's funny too, like Chinese food. I always feel after I eat Chinese food, I always feel an hour later, I feel like I'm still hungry.
Yep.
Well, also cleaners in the house too. We always use cleaners, and I don't think about it too. There's like different, like there is all natural cleaner. There's a bleach cleaner. There's a simply green cleaner, but they're all chemicals. What is a safe chemical to use to clean?
Well, that's a great question. There's a lot of safer brands out there, but one thing I do want to say is it's really hard to tell a lot of times what are in your cleaning products. And that's because cleaning product companies, most of them want to keep their formulas a trade secret. So when you look on the back of something, it's really hard to tell. Sometimes it will just say enzymes or anionic pectins, and we don't know what's in there. So I recommend there's so many great brands out there now, but look at the back. And if there's a whole lot of chemicals that you can't pronounce, I recommend putting it down. But I have sources in my book. I have a bunch of sources for cleaning because it's one of my favorite things. The other thing you can do is DIY most of your own, which is so simple because really it takes just baking soda, white vinegar, and distilled water. And you can probably make 10 different cleaning things from just those 3 ingredients.
Well, that's interesting. I never thought about that because we also use laundry detergent too. I met somebody a while back about the chemicals in laundry detergent. I didn't really think about it until the other day. Me and my son were playing mini golf inside with the black lights. I can see all the spots where the laundry detergent was on they didn't wash out on my shirt. So I was always wondering about that too, how the chemicals work and stuff like that.
Right. Well, that's a great question too. There's so many different ingredients that they can contain, but a lot of them can be allergenic to the skin. If you're sleeping in these and sweating in these, there's so many different ways that it can absorb into your body. So that's actually one of the things we want to be careful about laundry detergent and some of the chemicals they can contain, like optical brighteners and sodium lauryl sulfate, which is very irritating to the skin. There's so many different ingredients and so many different formulations. Well, it's always good to find a safer one.
It's always, but I want my shirt to smell good. I mean, it smells good. And I'm saying brand names, but it's stuff, the laundry detergent and stuff like that. Well, what is it? We talked about ADHD and leukemia about chemicals. What other things happen to the body once the chemicals get absorbed? Any other things that happen?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many different things that can affect asthma and respiratory issues, especially cleaning products. If you look at the back of some mold and mildew products, it says if you have certain breathing conditions, don't use them. It can also cause reproductive and developmental issues. They can act on hormones, which are our chemical messengers, and can affect so many different areas of the body. That can cause anything from cardiovascular issues to thyroid issues, weight, sleep problems. Some of these toxins can be toxic to the brain and nervous system. Some can also be carcinogenic, meaning that they cause cancer.
Interesting. Weight problems. I never put the chemical from what I'm drinking or eating would cause a weight problem because how does that happen? I was just kind of curious.
Oh, sure. Well, some of them, just because it's hormones, can act like we talked about. Actually, they found a new class of endocrine disruptors or hormone disruptors that are called obesogens.
Oh, wow.
And they're called that because they can alter our metabolism. They can cause our fat cells to switch on, which are so hard to get rid of. It's not even just in our food. It's in our beauty products, cleaning products too, these ingredients that are obesogens. So, yeah.
Well, about beauty products too. I mean, chemicals and that too. I mean, like I know women use lipstick and stuff like that. But what kind of chemicals are in those?
Oh, sure. Again, parabens, they're a preservative and they have a link possibly to breast cancer. And then there's always things like sodium lauryl sulfate or sodium laureth sulfate. And this is kind of a tricky one. That's sodium lauryl sulfate is something that makes things foam. So it's actually used in laboratories to irritate the skin intentionally to see if some anti-inflammatory or calming things work on the skin. One of the ways they make it less harsh is to turn it into sodium laureth, ETH sulfate, but then that can lead to being exposed to a carcinogenic toxin, 1,4-dioxane. So there's so many different things in products that you should avoid in personal care products and really read the back of the labels carefully.
Well, it's interesting too. We're in the time of this recording is summertime too. And I mentioned before I was out in the sun with my son yesterday a lot. It's about sunscreen. And there's so many different kinds of sunscreen. I know there's creams, there's sprays, there's SPF 100 to like, I don't know, 10. What's a good sunscreen actually?
Great. Well, there's two different types of sunscreens, but I recommend a mineral sunscreen. And those are the ones that you look on the back and under the active ingredients will be zinc oxide or titanium dioxide.
Why is that? I was curious.
There's also chemical sunscreens, which protect with the active ingredients is where you always want to look. You'll see things like avobenzone, oxybenzone, homosalate, octisalate, octapropylene. Those some can act as endocrine disruptors. Some actually degrade in sunlight. So they have to add more of those filters in that can be kind of harmful. Some can be irritating to the skin. If you've had a rash or reaction to your sunscreen, it could be those ingredients. So I don't think that there's a perfect sunscreen, but a mineral one is a great option because they don't have as many of the associated health effects as the chemical sunscreen. But something to mention here too is the active ingredients and what to look for. But there's also things in the inactive ingredients to look for. Just because it says inactive doesn't mean they're not harmful. It just means that they are not the ones doing the job. So active ingredients are usually regulated. And in this case, it would be the UV filters, the titanium dioxide, zinc oxide. But it's always very important to look at the bottom too, because like we had said in personal care and beauty products, there's things like parabens in there. There's also things like fragrance, which is also very allergenic. And that's one name that can be made up of dozens of chemicals. But again, it's a trade secret. So the companies don't have to list their individual ingredients.
Well, it's interesting too. I wonder, you have a program and stuff like that. And also, I was wondering if you could share any stories about people you come in contact with and found out about the green method.
I've had clients who have had eczema who have just taken out like some of the certain, like I think it was a sodium lauryl sulfate. There was another ingredient too that we had taken out, and a lot of the eczema went away. I always recommend being under a doctor's care, but I think that environmental toxins are a missing piece when we're looking at things. Even headaches. One client had sleeping issues with her toddler and stuffy noses. So we took the plugins and the air fresheners out of her home and the scented candles. So what I did really is so many people were asking me the same thing and I was doing the same protocol with them. So I came up with a 4-step process to jumpstart people into the slightly greener method because it can be overwhelming. It's called the READ method, but to replace plastics in the kitchen, eat organic as often as possible because some of those pesticides can act as they're linked also to ADHD and things like that and hormone disruption, some of them. A is to avoid artificial fragrance because again, there's so many allergenic issues, headaches. I mean, there's so many different things. They can be cancer causing chemicals and destroy dust because there are some endocrine disruptors there. They've even found lead in dust, even if you don't have the house built before 1978 with the paint, because you can bring it in on your shoes and from the outside.
Why I'm curious about organic. I always heard that sometimes I felt that was a way to sell the banana another dollar more expensive. But what is organic? And especially when it comes to like fruits and vegetables.
Oh, sure. Well, organic, there's been a lot of studies that show that it is worth it. But in my case, I always like to err on the side of caution. A lot of the studies have also shown that organic foods, because they're grown without as many pesticides, that they also have less heavy metals. Some do have more nutrients in some studies. So I think it's also not just about the nutritional value, but also what it doesn't have. And it's that heavy metal exposure.
Well, I'm curious, organic though, like bananas, things with skin on it. Does the chemicals actually penetrate the skin like banana or something that has an outer layer? I'm kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about individual foods, but I know with potato, one of the studies said 80% of the potatoes still had pesticide residue.
Interesting.
Yeah, but
I found that
skin. So
I was kind of curious because you always hear about that, and I'm like, is it true? Is it not true? How much of it is a gimmick, and what's not a gimmick? And I mean, but I guess you got to look at the studies and read up and make a best decision for yourself, I guess.
Yeah, and the Environmental Working Group has a great site too. Just a few days of eating organic can really lower the pesticide levels in the body. The Environmental Working Group has the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 list. Dirty Dozen is the produce that has the most pesticide residues, and the Clean 15 has the least amount. So if you can't buy organic all the time, or if you get to the store and can't buy organic of that produce, then you can buy conventional, which is the non-organic of the ones on the Clean 15. But really, when it comes down to it, I think it's worth it to eat that produce and get those nutrients rather than if it's not organic, I can't buy it.
Well, they always say when you go shopping, shop the outer rim of the store, not in the middle. That's where all the processed stuff is. But sometimes it's kind of hard, especially when the prices of food going up and stuff like that, to do that. But sometimes you got to bite the bullet and do what's best for you.
Right.
Another thing is you have a membership program. I got a chance to look at it a little bit, and I just want to talk a little more about that. I found that interesting.
So that goes past the slightly greener method, and it's because there's so many different areas of the home. In the slightly greener method and in the book, I go through foods and beverages, cleaning products, and personal care and beauty products. If you concentrate just in those areas first, it's a good jumping off point. The membership encompasses a lot of other things that aren't necessarily in those areas. So it's kind of a continuation after we've gotten those first things settled, because it's just those small steps we take. After what I went through with my son, I started out way too hot and heavy with removing the chemicals, and I drove myself and my family crazy, which isn't good either. I recommend starting with your why. If you have a health condition or anything like that, then in the book, I give you kind of not really a protocol, but whatever those toxins are that are linked to that. And then you find you can go to the store, and rather than memorizing dozens of different ingredient names, which I could not do, and I started and stopped so many times, you're just trying to memorize a few, or you can download some of the apps from the book to your phone. So what I wanted to do was help people learn how to do this themselves and do it in the most quick and direct method, and the membership helps them do that too.
Well, I like sort of reading that too on your website too, is your motto. You only have to make a little adjustments to make a big impact in your life. And I found that fascinating. But what does it mean to you?
Oh, I love that. I've never been asked that. I really think it's those small steps. And the book, the reason I wanted to write that is because I think there's so many things out there that scare tactics, and also say you have to avoid all these. But I actually take you through a method so that you can decide where to prioritize the toxins for your own family's unique needs. Because for me, again, it was like learning issues and ADHD. But someone else might have eczema, so they want to start differently. It's just those small steps. For me, it was foods and beverages where I started. And then I started taking things out of our personal care products. It's just a little bit at a time, and we don't have to have that perfection either. As parents, we're busy enough. So we have to learn how to balance having a healthy home, doing what's best for our family, but also giving ourselves grace. Maybe we should just follow something like the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the time we're doing this, but 20% of the time we need to allow ourselves and our kids to have the occasional treat, or they're going to rebel. And, it's not about deprivation. It's just about living that healthier lifestyle. And pretty soon you're going to change it from I can't have that to I don't want that. And which is important for ourselves and our kids especially, but basically just taking those small steps and giving ourselves the grace along the way.
Well, it's interesting too. It's just all the chemicals, like in the popular cookies and stuff too. You read it like, wow, that's a lot of chemicals. But you also, your book's coming out in August. We're talking a little about toxins, but I want to about a little bit you could talk a little about your book coming out.
That's where I take you through the slightly greener method. I have you start with your why, and then we go from there. I tell you about ingredients to avoid so that you can make the decision for yourself after reading through them. And then basically it takes you through kind of it's got a guidebook that goes along with it to help you actually map out. And then I recommend too, once you start doing that, you can actually start with another layer of what you want to do next. At the end, I have a bunch of resources for websites and apps to help you shop safer. I have a little protocol section. So if you are dealing with a specific health condition, I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose, always be under a doctor's care, never go off medication. Some of these toxins you might not feel anything, but like with the eczema, you might notice things going away. Also safer brands. I think I have over 100 safer brands in there. So just DIY recipes for cleaning products. It's just kind of an all-encompassing how to start out, but also how to start out with what's right for you at the time.
Since you mentioned something, I really want to ask is apps. What kind of apps are out there? Maybe you can share one or two.
Oh, sure. So Leaping Bunny is one for cosmetics. And then there's, I don't have my list here. don't even have my book in front of me. I know that stands out. And then there's some apps actually that you can put a health condition in, and then it'll tell you if you should buy that food or not. So things like that are listed in there too.
Awesome. Because, nowadays, everybody has a smartphone. We have access to like a whole computer without by a phone, I guess.
Well, I have that in there too.
No. It's fine. That's fine. It's fine. But final thoughts, wrapping up, anything about the Simply Green method you want to leave with the audience?
I think one of the things that is most important is that when we find this stuff out, especially as parents, my number one rule is no mom guilt, no parent guilt. Because when we find out some of this stuff, it's so easy to be like, oh gosh, I gave that to my kid, or I just ate that. So just realizing that it's that once we know better, we can do better. Just allowing ourselves that grace, and also realizing as parents that we're doing the best we can.
I know that parent guilt. I had that problem too. I should not let my kid play that game or give him that treat, but you got to do what you got to do once in a while, give in once in a while. You can't always win the fight. But
That's right.
if they want to connect with you about your book, your website, and your program.
Sure. I can be found at slightlygreener.com and on Instagram as slightlygreener, probably the two best places.
Well, Tanya, thank you much for being on the podcast today. I really do appreciate. All links will be in the show notes for this episode. I really want to thank you for taking time in your day. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I hope this conversation with Tanya Harris gave you something to think about. Whether it's swapping out plastic containers, rethinking our cleaning supplies, or just being a little more aware of what's around our kids. Sometimes small steps can really lead to big changes. Remember, you don't have to do it all at once. This isn't about being perfect. It's about making progress that fits into our lives daily. If you want to dig deeper, check out Tanya's book, her Slightly Greener Method, and more helpful resources over at slightlygreener.com. Of course, you can find everything we talked about in today's episode at nosittingonthesideline.com/160. And if it's your first time listening, thank you. Thank you for making it this far. I'm glad you were here today. This show is all about real conversations about real people trying to do the best we can. Until next time, give your kids a hug, call a friend, let them know how much you care. Till next time, take care. God bless. Again.